Steve the cat. You guys haven't seen Steve in a while, so there he is. Say hi, Steve. Hi, Steve. What's up, boys and girls? This is me apologizing for a mistake I made, which is why I'm showing my real face as opposed to my made-up face. I will be the first to admit that I fuck up a lot when I'm doing this. Weird. My mouth doesn't match on the screen what I'm saying, so I guess there's a delay. That'll make this even stranger. Yesterday I made a video about these several videos and comments and articles I've seen over the past couple weeks about the wussification of D&D and this whole weird, before if you played before so-and-so, you weren't a wuss, but if you played after so-and-so, you are a wuss, or something like that, or people who play this version of the games are wusses, and I don't know. I was told that apparently Pundit made the first video, even though I've discovered a video of another individual claiming they made the first video. So I don't know. I've found like 5 so far, either videos or Reddits or Twitter posts or whatever about, today's D&D versus old D&D, So I made this 20-minute rant about the wussification of videos, and several people called me out for gaslighting and intentionally misleading, and that I didn't understand Pundit's video. And I'm going to say, I didn't see Pundit's video. I've been told he made a video, and apparently there's claims that his was the first, but I rarely, if ever, watch Pundit, because I don't agree with a lot of the things he says. And I'm really tired of being associated with that part of the hobby. I'm really trying to move past the whole, us versus them, and just stick with my little teeny 1,500 plus niche of, hey, let's just talk about what's going on. Yeah, I guess I fucked up, and for that, I'm sorry. I wasn't responding to any one particular video. I have watched bits and pieces of them, but I'm generally it's just like D&D codifies its players now, and D&D 5 is not as hardcore as 4, and D&D 4 wasn't as hardcore as 3, and D&D 3 wasn't as hardcore as 2, and sometime around 1 we started codifying the players, and another one's like, no, they started codifying players around 2. You're gonna hear that word a lot, codifying. So basically means making the game progressively safer, making the game having more ways to get the characters out of trouble, because there's no fun if in the very first 5 minutes of the game the character dies. And apparently in the original game that Gygax originally intended, which is, of course, this is what Gygax intended because he wrote Tomb of Horrors, so obviously Gygax intended that the game be all about resource management, the fear of going 10 feet without dying, and rapid character death. Right, and this is supposedly something that we've been doing since day one. I don't remember that, but I'm going to assume at this point in time that I have lived in a very secluded bubble in Southern California, and the way the hundreds of people I've played with up and down the Southern California coast, and in Northern California, and all the in Oregon and Washington, and when I was overseas in England, and when I was playing in Texas and all the other places that I've played D&D, and all the hundreds and hundreds of other people I've played with, that it was actually a very small bubble. And other people apparently play D&D a completely different way, where it was all hardcore and death at 0, and you had to, count for every torch and every bit of thing, and, encumbrance. And it's like, okay, maybe I don't remember ever playing that way. I was in a 15-year long campaign that went from AD&D all the way through 3.5, and I've spoken to several of those people, and they don't remember it being played that way. But again, I guess I lived in a bubble. I don't know, because a lot of the people have said, no, you misunderstood. They're talking about how D&D was unsafe then, but it's safer now. And we don't like that. Or D&D is now trying to approach a larger audience, and we want it to go back to the way it was, and then this version of D&D today is wussy. So basically, it's just the edition wars. This edition was better than that edition. So I'm sorry, I misunderstood the few videos and articles I read about this. Basically, or my brain just had a dyslexic, autistic moment, and I just got angry. And I'm just, I'm always angry about this us versus them, old D&D versus new D&D. This is the way we used to play, and the people who play now are somehow, wrong. Part of the reason why I'm always angry is that many of these people who make these videos and comments about D&D don't play 5e. They will gladly tell you how much they hate 5e and how much they hate Wizards of the Coast and how much they hated 4e and how much they hate Wizards of the Coast. Some of them either go far back as how much they hated 3e and they hate Wizards of the Coast, and it hasn't been D&D till 2, and we played AD&D 2nd edition this way. It's like, again, I don't remember that. I never ever played like that. And I could argue that, well, the codifying and cuddling and making the game safe dates back to the original game. The game is not realistic and has never been realistic, and it has always been built about, we want to stay alive because we want to see what happens. In real life, you don't get extra. You're not harder to kill the longer you're around doing your job. Okay. I've been doing this YouTube thing for since 2015. So I would assume that if I get experience points every time I do this YouTube thing, I've leveled up, which by D&D logic means I've gained extra hit points, which means I should be harder to kill than I was in 2015. Because just magically through D&D logic, every couple days you suddenly get tougher. You level up. There are wizards in 0 D&D who can do things to alter the outcome of combat. Yeah, that's not codifying. Yeah, that's totally realistic military medieval, that there were wizards around, and that wearing armor makes you harder to hit. Which armor class? -10. Okay, so if I try and hit you, I've got to subtract 10 from my roll, because it somehow makes you harder to hit. Now, anybody who knows anything about actual combat and actual medieval warfare armor would actually tell you, no, wearing 300 pounds of plate mail actually made you very easy to hit because it was difficult to move. It took a whole team to put people on your horse, and it took a whole team of people to put you in and get out of the armor. They relied on the stopping power of the armor to get them through, which is why when crossbows and muskets started showing up, they got rid of the armor and went back to wearing light armor so they could outrun the arrows. But in D&D, it's always been about, well, now you're harder to hit. Bows are dex weapons. Anybody who's pulled a longbow would tell you no, they're not dex weapons. So really, there's always been a codifying in the game, because it's a game about having fun, about idiots going into a dungeon and hitting things with sticks and then coming back with stuff and then leveling so they could do it again. But yes, I will agree that when the rules were revised, they made changes and they added things that made the game safer for players and allowed the characters to last a little bit longer and have more resources and have a little bit more fun, and maybe they were a little less lenient on the whole you have to track every torch thing, or maybe they weren't, because again, I don't remember this, and people will say, oh, well, it was in the DM's guide, but other people will say, well, it wasn't really in the DM's guide, and some people will tell you, this is exactly what Gygax wanted, and this is exactly how Gygax played, and if you don't play this way, you're whatever. And other people will say, no, that's not what Gygax wanted, he wanted you to do whatever you want. So I think I'm just more been a member of the do whatever you want school. And the way I always played, it was never assumed that one version was better than the other version. We just played the version that was currently available because we could get stuff. If we switched from 2 to 3, it was because 3 was available and there was stuff available for 3. And there was things in 3 we liked, like skills. And then if there was something we didn't like in 2 or 1, we just tossed it aside and didn't use it, like the negative, you don't die to -10. Apparently that's never been an actual thing, even though every game I ever played in, death was at -10, or death was at negative your starting hit dice, or death wasn't negative your constitution, but it was always be, your unconscious was 0, you start bleeding out, and then you reach a certain number, and then you're dead. Well, I mean, you're mostly dead because it's D&D, and even in day 1, there was, dozens of ways to bring you back from the dead. If, I've always believed in the rule that if the only way the character stays dead is if you don't really want to bring them back. Otherwise, people will always find a way to bring a character back if they want to. But, okay, so the Wussification videos, of which I've seen 4, and the articles of which I've seen 3, and just the generally, consensus that is continuing always that this version of game was different than the previous version of game. And this version of game was different from that version of game. And somehow, because if you play this version of game, well, this is the wussy version. 5e is the wussy version of D&D. It doesn't, it doesn't emulate the realistic, grim, dark, accurate medieval combat that 0 reflected. And, it's all about mental enhancement and cultural acceptance and diversion, and it's a lifestyle engine and a tool for enlightenment. No, it's a thing that Wizards of the Coast makes to make Hasbro money. And the reason why Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition is the way it is today is because marketing has shown them that they will make money by gearing towards a specific audience. And guess what? The old school, of which I assume I am no longer a member, in fact, I'm not sure I was ever a member of the old school, is not the target audience that Hasbro is aiming D&D today for. Sorry, I'm not the target audience, and I haven't been the target audience for a very long time. And you, old people like myself who've been playing this game since the 70s, we're no longer the target audience because we openly tell Wizards of the Coast, I'm not going to give you money. How many of us in January said, I'm not going to give you money anymore, Wizards of the Coast? I don't give Wizards of the Coast money anymore. And Hasbro's like, well, okay, then why should I make product for you if you've said you won't buy my stuff and you haven't bought any of my stuff since 2014, if not sooner? Oh, I haven't bought Wizards of the Coast crap since 3. I haven't bought D&D since 3.5. I've never played 4. You don't think Hasbro's looking at the algorithm and going, well, okay, you're not our target audience because you're not spending money on us. So why should we coddle you as opposed to coddling the people who are spending money? And if we continue to reinforce that market, of course, we're going to get money from that market. It's a self-fulfilling prophecy. So 5th edition is the wussiest version of D&D, and we're wussy if we play 5e. It's only because the target audience embraces the philosophy, and Hasbro embraces the philosophy of the target audience. When Hasbro starts seeing that money is petering off from that target audience, which it is because Hasbro stock is currently at like $60 a share, and Wizards of the Coast money is once again nowhere near that $1 billion Hasbro expected them to make by the end of this year, you will see the politics change. Well, no, we won't. Yeah, you will. Do you not pay attention when I post the videos about things Hasbro has said or Crawford has said about the changes coming to D&D? Or the whole June 2027 D&D 6X thing, or the fact that when they announced what the actual plans for 2024 D&D, Crawford and Perkins both said 5-year plan. Everything we're going to tell for 2024 D&D, we're telling in the next 5 years, because we have to convince Hasbro whether that market that sprang up between 2018 and 2022 is still there. So that is the market that they have geared towards. But now that market is not giving them the money it was 5 years ago. So now Hasbro is telling Wizards, okay, it's time to rethink the market to see where we are going in the next 5 years. So the wussified 5e is going to change. Some of us might enjoy those changes. Some of those might think those changes are horrible. Hasbro, being a business, is watching those changes. Every change in the wussification is because the company that owned D&D has tried to make D&D more approachable to more people to make more money. And nobody really wants to play D&D the way people think it was played in 0 edition. Now, of course, again, I don't know. I know people said, well, this is the way we used to play, and my argument is like, no, I don't know anybody who ever played that way, and I don't know if you did either. I know you think you did. Now, we've heard my arguments before about how I played the exact same way I did in da-da-da. It's like, no, you don't. You can't. It is emotionally, mentally, physically, and psychologically impossible for you to be playing the game the exact same way you played it in 1976 because you're not the same person. And my memories of the way I played or what we did are definitely different than what actually happened because people tell me, oh no, this is what I remember. And then another person says, oh no, this is what I remember. And then I look over what few notes I have left that didn't get burned up in 2018. I'm like, oh no, this is completely different. Here's a quote that Jim Lampman said in February of 1993 that completely counteracts what I thought happened that year in TJ's game because memory. So yeah, again, I'm sorry. This is a retraction. If I upset you, I guess I misinterpreted what was intended for the video and the wussification of D&D. I don't think D&D is any more or less wussy than it's ever been. It's different because Edition Wars, it's not the D&D I played when I was 12 because, yeah, and I'm not the target audience, so what? Now, guys, if you don't give Wizards of the Coast money, but which is fine, because the people who do give Wizards of the Coast money are the people that is Wizards of the Coast target audience. If that target audience changes, as it is, then you will see a slow transition of the game. Now, you could do one of two things. You could never, ever, ever talk about D&D or Wizards of the Coast ever again, thus not giving them free press, and more importantly, not letting them know how upset you are. The best way to influence the choices Hasbro does with Wizards of the Coast and Dungeons & Dragons is to not say anything. Because if the thousands and thousands of old school players who have been complaining about the direction and telling Wizards of the Coast, fuck you, I don't give you any money, stop saying that, Hasbro will go, hey, those guys aren't complaining about us anymore. The algorithm is showing changes. Then they might go, well, maybe there's a chance we can hook them back in and start getting money from them if we present them with a product that they won't complain about. Because the people who are saying good things about D&D are the people that are creating our revenue. And the people who say bad things about D&D, well, that's free press, which tells the people who say good things about D&D to start generating more revenue for us because the people who said bad things about D&D are saying bad things about D&D. But the people who say bad things about D&D do have an effect because we stopped January from happening. So Hasbro saw, which of course counteracts what I originally said. But Hasbro's not going to invest energy in making D&D safe again, not unsafe or not wussified, unless they think it's in their best interest financially. So you could continue to rage against Hasbro and the choices they make and tell people who, you're a wuss for playing 5e. You're a horrible person for playing 5e. 5e is horrible, and the mentality of 5e is horrible, and Hasbro is horrible. And Hasbro will go, yeah, okay, I'm not going to make a game for you because you hate my product. But you're still buying my figures. You're still buying my maps. Oh, the 5e fans are upset about the choices we made in January. We should definitely change the game. We should definitely make changes, or at least make them think they made changes, because we know in a couple days you're all going to forget. So, again, I'm sorry, I misunderstood. Edition wars, high school never ends. There are people who don't like D&D today and are unhappy with the D&D's transition from one version to another version, whether that version actually existed or not. I don't know anymore. Every time I make a blah blah video, I get in trouble, but I also get a ton of free press and a ton of, responses. So at the end of the day, again, hey, you're talking shit about me, but you're talking about me, so I still win, because YouTube only counts for the clicks. Doesn't care what you say. Thank you for listening to me blab about this for 20 minutes. I don't script this. Unlike some people, I just go top of my head, which, as we know, doesn't work right. So I often say things without thinking about them. I often say things and don't realize I've said them until people call me on it. There's often entire videos where I end the video and realize I have no idea what I just said, because the brain just doesn't work. Autism, dyslexia, and age are all, catching up with me. And, who knows how much longer I can even do this with the way my brain is turning. So enjoy the nonsense that is the OGM while you can, because Lord knows how much fucking longer I'm going to be around. Or at least being able to do this in any level of quality, because I just wasted 20 minutes with an apology that should have been only 5 minutes long. And then I looked down and I realized, maybe I should start scripting these things. But this is all from my heart. This is all from my emotions. And because of that, I make mistakes. I'm an idiot. You guys know I'm an idiot. I will be the first to admit I'm an idiot. And plenty of other people out there have told me I'm an idiot. Maybe that's why I only have 1,500 subs. Maybe you would prefer something more shiny and more angry and political. I mean, that video yesterday got way more reactions than any other video I've made this month, or last month. So maybe that's what people like. They'll reactionary, angry, off the cuff, completely nonsensical, blah, 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 I hate you, you're wrong videos, which I hate making. But, I just completely disagreed with the sentiment, and I still kind of disagree with the sentiment. I don't really think D&D today is any more or less different than D&D was in 1976. The players are different, and the philosophy of the company is different, because the philosophy of the company reflects the philosophy of the players who are giving them money. When the philosophy of the players who are giving them money changes, then the philosophy of the company that makes the game will change, and then the next edition of the game will be different than the previous edition. Wow, 4th edition is completely different than 3rd edition. It's like the target audience has changed. I hope you accept my apology, and if you don't, well, I'm an idiot. So if you don't, I assume that's why. Have a great day, and now back to your regularly scheduled nonsense, because I've wasted 23 minutes of your time.